Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, and I am streaming live in Moses Lake. I am back in Moses Lake. I'm super excited to have Rob Hazlewood on. I actually saw him either on TikTok or on Instagram. I'm not sure which one first. And he is a professional water skier and a type 1 diabetic. So we are going to discuss the challenges that he has and how he has overcome type 1 diabetes and become a world-class athlete. So Rob, welcome to our show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm super excited to have you on. So tell us a little bit about your history. We were talking about it. You don't really have a home. You're kind of from England, but because you're a professional water skier, you go wherever the water is, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, pretty much. So I was born in England, based in England, and my home is obviously England. I live on a beautiful water ski kind of facility in England with my family. But yeah, kind of at the minute, I'm 22, just really trying to pursue this sport as a career and kind of see where I can get with it. And yeah, just pretty much wherever the warmish water is and wherever they'll let me ski, that's kind of where I'm at right now. So yeah, it's kind of home is where the lake is kind of thing is, I guess, what you could say.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you're living your dream, and I'm super happy for you, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
So
it's fun.
tell
No,
us,
it's something I always dreamed of.
yeah. So tell us, actually, episode number 1 of Health Solutions, our podcast was back in October of 2019, and we actually featured my twin brother who has a type 1 diabetic son. And at the time, he was a high school wrestler and very competitive. And it was nice to showcase how, type 1 diabetes, it's not that it's not a challenge, but you can definitely, especially with today's technology and such, you can definitely still be a competitive athlete and have type 1 diabetes. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's nowadays it is obviously a lot more effort. There's a lot more there's a lot more stress and different requirements to someone who doesn't have type 1 diabetes. But yeah, it's 100% possible to do any sport to the highest level. You just have to take a little bit more care and attention onto some stuff that other people don't. And it's just the one thing I've always said with diabetes. It's great. You can eat anything. You can. There's no crazy, like if you have a peanut allergy, say, or you have to be checking ingredients, stressing about all that. It's kind of easygoing in some ways, but also I know that I'm going to have it for the rest of my life. 4 or 5 meals a day, I need to be injecting, watching my sugars all the way in between. So it's a constant full on pressure compared to, like, say, an allergy, but it can be a little bit easier sometimes. But yeah, getting those numbers in the right range and keeping them there can be a challenge, but definitely doesn't stop you from being an athlete if that's kind of what your passion is.
Yeah. Now, so tell us, you mentioned something about you can eat anything you want. So I'm
Yeah,
assuming, Rob, being a
yeah,
competitive athlete,
yeah.
that you really don't eat anything and everything you want. Is that right? Can you clear that up?
It depends. I mean, and it depends on what kind of situation you're in. Obviously, we're coming out of off season now. I probably ate a little bit more of what you want to do. But I mean, I trained as a chef, which is one thing. That's kind of what my training was in. I did 3 years of culinary college, essentially. So I love food. I absolutely love food. My family loves food, so I get really kind of into that. And as an athlete, that doesn't mean that you all of a sudden stop eating food. It doesn't mean that you stop enjoying food. It means that in certain parts of the season, you have to optimize what you're eating, make sure you're eating the right things. And for me as a skier, it's very weight based. We're on top of water. The heavier you are, the more you're going to sink. So it's not like a lot of sports where maybe the heavier you are, there's not massive effects other than health and fitness. Whereas in skiing, literally the weight is, if you are 2 kilos heavier, you are sinking. You're 2 more kilos on your ski, you're sinking more. Your everything is different, if that makes sense. Um, so the weight is kind of the biggest aspect, and then ideally, obviously, you have the health and the feeling and and how what you're feeding your body and fueling your body in there. But yeah, I like to think that I try keep, especially mid-season, I try keep a healthy diet kind of. But my main goal for me is protein, hitting my protein goals. That one stabilizes my sugars and makes life a lot easier on that front. Um, and I feel so much better when I kind of hit the protein goals. But every now and then you got to treat yourself with an ice cream or something that takes your fancy. But you can't, just because I'm an athlete, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden all food is off bounds. It means you just have to prioritize for different parts of the season and make sure that you're treating your body a little more right than most people.
Absolutely. I love that concept because we
Yeah.
can't be in peak form year round,
No.
right?
No. And as well,
Right.
it's especially the ski season now. I mean, last season started. The first tournament was May 1st. The last tournament was November 5th. So that's last year it was kind of the sports really kind of picking back up with the events, especially after COVID. Kind of there's been a ton of new sponsors that wanted to kind of branch out and put on these events. So again, this season it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same length, but even fuller. I think the whole season there's maybe 2-3 weekends off. So the mental kind of strain of that in itself is absolutely insane. And I think one place where my sport is very, very different from, say, basketballers or footballers. Footballers have their body to look after and they have their skills. Whereas in skiing, you have your body to look after, you have your skills and balance, but you also have a piece of equipment that you're designing, controlling, and it's so. I don't know how much you know about skiing, but in slalom we have a fin, we have a ski, and we move the fin by thousandths of an inch, and
Yep.
5 thousandths of an inch is a big difference, a massive, massive difference. So there's so many variables to kind of keep on top of. Maybe your ski breaks, or maybe something happens to your ski, and you've got to dial that in, but you've got a tournament. Then you've got to go, you've got to fly. There's not a crazy amount of money in the sport right now. So there's also that kind of mental kind of stress going on there. So if you're on top of that, completely eating nothing that you enjoy and miserable there and doing all that, you sometimes need to hit that off season, take a little bit of a break and let yourself kind of de-stress from that. And for me, unfortunately, I love food and food helps with that. But I know recently, I don't know, there's that Paddy the Baddy guy in UFC, and he's a UFC fighter where obviously weight is super, super, super important, but he gets cuts down to his weight, finishes his fight, and then just blows up like 50 pounds. Not the healthiest thing in the world,
Right,
but
right, right.
it can be sometimes sometimes it's tough as an athlete to be able to kind of dial that in, and that's one of the things I struggle with. But I'm kind of learning how to dial in and really kind of make sure that nutrition is right and the weight is right for the season.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, there's an off season and an on season, and time when you have to be strict. I think
Yeah.
probably gaining 50 pounds in the off season
Oh,
is
he's way
probably a
probably
right.
aggressive.
It's probably a
Not,
little
it's
bit
probably not
overkill.
ideal. Yeah.
I mean, believe me, I could definitely do it. I mean, I'm a mountain
Oh,
bike racer, and I could
so
definitely
could I.
gain 50
Yeah.
pounds in the off season if I
Yeah.
wanted to. So I have to definitely be
Yeah.
careful all the time.
That was a
But
little extreme of an example, but
yeah, for sure. And thank you for that. So let's go back to food. So
hmm
I know traditionally, and I don't know how you were trained as a type 1 diabetic,
hmm
but me being a pharmacist, I'm in the
hmm
healthcare field,
yeah.
and I will tell you that I've learned a lot over the last 25 years about, diabetes and diets and how we treat diabetes and whether it be
Yeah.
type 2 or type 1. Because in reality, I know we want to argue about it in the healthcare system about type 1 and type 2 diabetes are way different. They need to be treated different.
Oh,
And
completely
I
different.
get that. They definitely do. But still, both of them at the heart is a carbohydrate metabolism problem. Now, one of
hmm
them, type 1 diabetics don't make enough insulin, and type
Don't
2
make any.
diabetics just aren't sensitive to insulin.
Yeah.
So either way, it's a carbohydrate metabolism problem
Yeah.
because insulin is what helps uptake glucose or carbohydrates out of the blood
hmm
into the
Yep.
system.
Yep.
So, speak of you talked about eating your protein goals. Now,
hmm
I know when I was a pharmacist, when I was in pharmacy school 20 some years ago, they would talk about how important carbohydrates are to type 2 diabetics or type 1
hmm
diabetics, and
Yeah.
how 80% of their food should be carbohydrates. Now, I think we've changed that a little bit over the last few years. And I know athletes like yourself have really changed that because that's probably not the best. So tell us about your protein goals, your carbohydrate goals, your macros. Do you track macros, all that stuff?
I mean, for me personally, the way that I've always have been explained it and the way that I have understood it type 1 is you have no insulin. The simplest, maybe there's some floating around there, but in the simplest, most easiest way to understand, I was always taught there's no insulin there. So you have nothing to go. If I eat 10 grams of carbs, which is a tiny amount of carbs, it's like half a packet of chips. If I eat that, my blood sugars are going to go up way above optimal levels. So it's not like the little bits here and there, they get kind of sucked up by the insulin, and obviously exercise and diet and all that thing do help a lot with type 1 diabetes. But for me, what I found in terms of, especially when I started really kind of dialing in my macros and started tracking mainly my calories and my protein were the two things I really tried to dial in on. If I was overeating, so not specifically what I was eating, but if I was overeating, I found it really hard to keep control. So obviously I was trying to eat a clean diet of mainly kind of, I like to think of the simplest way for me to attack a diet is simple foods, kind of making sure that not too much is out of a packet, which doesn't really matter in terms of weight loss or health goals, but it's an easy way for me to track it in my mind. If I'm eating kind of that rice, pastas, kind of just basic meats with some little seasonings and sauces on there, my blood sugars get so much easier to control, and I end up having to inject a lot less. And that's the biggest thing for me. I kind of have this thing where I enjoy eating a lot of food, and like if I go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, whew, it's not good. But I find that the biggest thing for me when I really started to try lose weight or try to control my weight and feel healthy, that just eating less food. I don't really like to split. I like to keep my diet simple, and I like to keep the way that I think about health and weight loss and keeping it level of simple. I think carbs and fats, I think if you're at a certain point where you've kind of really dialed in every single part of your life, your sleep, your hydration, you're hitting your calorie goal, first of all, I think is the most important. You're then starting to look at your protein goal. You're getting all of that dialed in. You're not doing anything else bad. You're not kind of overdoing caffeine. You're not smoking. You're not doing drugs, anything along those lines. Then you can maybe start looking at those other macros. Maybe the carbs obviously helps, and the fats obviously helps. But for me, as in a small sport with guidance in my nutrition, but I don't have a full-time nutritionist on hand, and I have a life that I want to enjoy and I want to live, I first of all look at calories. If I'm going right, I'm going on a diet, bad word at the minute, but say I'm going to go right. I have my next tournament is in 2 weeks. I need to lose 6 pounds. I then am going to go right. I'm going to dial in my calories because I have so many other problems in my nutrition. Sometimes I don't get the right sleep. Sometimes you don't get other things. But for me, if I dial in my calories first, then once I feel like I'm starting to hit that, and then I add in the protein, that for me then lets the food choices that I pick that fit in towards my calorie goal and my protein goal then kind of seem to balance out the fats and the carbohydrates, if that makes sense. So if anything, I'm the complete opposite. I kind of let the carbs fall where they are. I carb count the meal that's in front of me, and that's kind of how I then control my diabetes. But eating less and really kind of trying to dial in that protein for me. Skiing's not a massively I don't quite know the right word to say. It's a very intense sport, but it's 15 minutes of exercise. Essentially, it's a full-on hit workout. It's an attacking. It's 6 passes over 15 minutes, 15 seconds of just pure they put a weight on a rope, and I think I pulled 363 kilos, which is like 700 pounds. So I'm pulling 700 pounds with my body weight. Essentially, someone's getting a bar, dropping 700 pounds into my hands, and then I've got to catch it and keep my position and not just crumple to the ground. That's essentially what slalom is. And we do that. There's 6 boys, 6 passes. So that's like 60 times someone's giving you, bad maths there, but that's a lot of times that someone is dropping a weight in your hands and you've got to catch it. So it's not necessarily like going for a 10-mile run, but it's like deadlifting 20 times and going, right, that's me done for the day. So I found that upping my carbs, I didn't really need the energy as such, unless I'm doing a really big training day with lots of sets, lots of workouts, lots of running, walking. But for purely my sport and my skiing, I found that the protein was by far the most important thing. If I was lacking on my protein, and I didn't believe it, there was a good friend at the lake was really starting to get into a macros. I'm like, honestly, I was only looking at calories. You should start kind of looking into the protein. I was like, no, once I get the calories sorted, I'll look into it. But then I kind of forced myself to, okay, let's try hit 120, 140 grams of protein a day. I think I was at. And as soon as I started tracking, I realized that I would go some days and I'd get like 40 grams of protein. I'm like, that's no wonder I'm a little bit sore. And then once I started hitting those higher numbers, my lack of DOMs and my lack of soreness the next day just was insanely noticeably less. My injuries, my niggles, I never really got as such injuries, but the niggles I get in my back and the ribs, like I say, it's intense. It's 700 pounds that you're pulling repetitively, kind of maybe 2-3 sets a day. The niggles that kind of were popping up from that greatly got reduced by making sure I hit my protein goals. So yes, this is a diabetic podcast, but for me, I like to think of I'm not that different. I just see the food that's in front of me. I have to go, okay, how many carbs are in that? Inject. Let's hope we get it right. And then I kind of carry on my nutrition and my daily goals as a non-diabetic, just making sure that my levels are in the correct range and I correct for that, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And I will tell you,
Yeah.
Rob, you should host this podcast because you've been preaching the last 5 minutes about what we talk about all the time. And it's not just
Thank you.
diabetics, but just
Yeah.
good eating routine in general.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I discussed this with my twin brother, says my nephew has type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
In some ways, and I don't mean this in a bad way. So
No, yeah, go
in
ahead.
some ways,
I will not be offended, don't worry.
yeah, but in some ways, type 1 diabetics have a little bit of an unfair advantage because you guys check your glucoses, so you know what happens right away when you eat stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the standard diet that most Americans eat, most people don't know what happens to their glucose after they eat.
Yeah.
So it takes 10 or
Yeah.
12 years before those effects jump back on them, and then they have type 2
Yeah.
diabetes.
Yeah, that's where it
So,
comes in.
and so, in some ways, I wish that more people would, check their glucoses. And that's one thing we promote here. And I've even put a continuous glucose monitor on myself before, and we'll talk about yours a little bit later.
Yeah.
Just to see what happens when we eat, when we exercise, when we sleep, when we're stressed. And it's amazing. And I'm sure you know all that stuff. And,
Yeah.
you sound like the 22 years that I imagine you've been dealing with diabetes for 12, 15 years.
Yes, 12. So I was diagnosed when I was 12 years old. Yeah. So 10 years basically now.
That's pretty common.
10th anniversary.
Yeah, right. So you figured this out, and kudos to you for that, Rob. And I know that you have maybe some doctors or pharmacists, nurses that have educated you, but ultimately, like with anything that we have with our own health, we have to take charge of our own health.
Yeah.
Doctors can help, pharmacists can help educate, but ultimately you're in charge of your own health. That's one thing we preach in this podcast is we like to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So thank you for doing that and educating us.
And that's one thing I'd like to add on that as well is, yes, obviously your blood sugars are, and this is in terms of diet, and this is not even for what I've experienced as someone who loves food and has had a hard time I was a big kid, had a really hard time losing weight. And it's still something I struggle with now and again, I don't want to keep coming back to losing weight. I don't think that's healthy for a lot of people. But in terms of for me as an athlete, and the biggest priority for me is making sure that weight is at the right level. It's almost just keeping it simple. For me, like I said, I can try kind of do all the stuff that I want to do with my insulin timing and everything around that and making sure that I do all this right. But if I'm eating too much food or I'm eating and even if it's just too much in one meal, even like I'm getting super bloated, like or if I'm eating just some crazy kind of foods, obviously a McDonald's, a pizza, the biggest example I can give you, and it's just come to mind, Papa John's pizza. If I have a Papa John's pizza, and I kid you not, if this is the most perfect example of something. So I have a Papa John's pizza, a medium. I don't know what in America, a medium's probably the size of myself, but a normal size.
Right, it's America, right?
a normal size pizza that you would eat and finish. It's a treat. You've skied well, you've done whatever. It's a treat. I'm gonna enjoy this pizza. I'm gonna be full, and I'm just gonna have a great time eating it. If I eat that and I finish the meal full, so you eat a little bit, maybe more than I probably should, but that's life. I have to inject 5 minutes before. Then I will dip because of the amount of fat that's in the cheese, is what I've been told. I will dip down. I'm like, okay, timed it perfect. first time I did this, I freaked out on the dip and ate some gummies to like go back up. I was like, oh, I do not want to be low.
Right.
Like I was going to bed, and then boom, it'll go. But then, so then I would inject again because I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to inject, and it will go down and it'll dip. And sometimes again, I'll like freak out because I'm, whoa, we're dipping hard, and it will go up again, and I'll have to inject a third time. And if I don't do that third injection, I could be going to bed dead level. I could be. We use different units in England versus America, but 8 units, say. Sorry, 8. Is it millimole per deciliter? Something along those lines.
Yeah, and I
I think
don't know what the
yours would be
conversion of that is.
70. I think yours is 70.
Oh,
A good
okay.
range.
Okay, that sounds about right.
You're going to bed.
Yep.
We're perfect. I've had this pizza. This was 3-4 hours ago. I'm talking. I've had this pizza, right? And I've gone up once to go down, to go up again, go down, managed, caught it perfectly level. If I don't go and inject a third time while I'm perfectly level, I will shoot absolutely through the roof and be near the highest readings that you probably have, probably 200, 300 by 2 hours. And that's like just that as it's the best example because I think it shows kind of how crazy it is. But I have to inject 3 times for that one pizza to be somewhat level, and even then, it's probably still going to be shooting up the next day. And that to me was like, wow. And another example is we used to have, you don't have them over here, but Lucozade, like a sugary Gatorade, right? That's fizzy. In England, in school, they were amazing. They were what everyone wanted. It was like an energy drink, but it seemed cool to drink them, so loads of people would drink them. And I'd be here as a diabetic, right? And if I would drink, that used to be what I would have when I was low, especially when I was in my honeymoon phase and I needed more to bring me up than I do now. I would drink these Lucozades. I'm like, these kids are drinking these Lucozades like 2-3 times a day, and I know what it does to my sugars. It just skyrockets them. And the amount that your body has to, and that's for me the simplest way to think about type 2 diabetes is the amount of sugar that you have to kind of attack, the amount that your body has to go, wow, we need to like work to pump this back down, is just so straining on your system. And for me, the easiest way I've found to explain it is you get type 2 diabetes when your body just goes, I'm just done. I've done too much of this. And
that's awesome you shared that, because I agree. And I kind of, going back to what I was discussing about, we tax our systems when we don't know when we're not diabetic, because we don't know what our glucose are doing, but later on it catches up to us. And I think what you're doing when you're eating those sugary stuff, or you're eating those pizzas, which is not, it's okay to do every once in a while. Let's just get that clear.
I do as a diabetic. I have them.
Right. Yeah. But in reality, even if you're not diabetic, you're taxing your pancreas to produce a whole bunch of insulin to lower that blood glucose, and eventually your pancreas is going to be tired out and it's going to say, I can't do it anymore. No. So you either get insulin resistance or you don't produce as much insulin, and then you get type 2 diabetes, which is a, it's an epidemic in America, unfortunately. And it's largely due to what we eat and overeating. That's really the case.
And that's the thing for me. What you eat is great, but even when I really kind of attacked the dieting hard in COVID year 2020, I really kind of I was a little heavier than I want to be, and I was like, right, I'm going to really kind of dial in where I want to go. I tracked everything religiously. I weighed every single thing that went in my mouth. There was, how some people say, oh, tracking your calories doesn't work, but it's because they're missing half of it. Like every single thing that passed my teeth got tracked, whether it was a drink, whether it was oil, whether it was fat, whether it was just a treat, whether it was like you have like equivalent to like a Hershey's Kiss in America. Like any tiny thing that went in, I tracked religiously for kind of 3 months straight. And again, it was less of what I ate and making sure that if I found that I wasn't overfeeding my body. So if I burnt 2,000 calories, I ate 2,000 calories. My sugars, and I started to do that consistently for say a week straight, I would notice the difference. My sugars just became so much easier to control. So yes, obviously the pizza is bad word, bad whatever. Essentially, in simple terms, it's not fantastic. It is not the best choice. But it was less so the fact that but if all of a sudden I started equally feeding my body the right amount of food, not too much, not too little, but especially the not too much side, then my sugars just all of a sudden got noticeably so much easier to control. Obviously the things help, but just the amount of calories straight up made a big difference for me.
Yeah,
and if you look at And unfortunately, if you look at a Papa John's pizza, the right amount is what? Say you're having dinner, it's maybe 750 calories. That's 3 slices of pizza. That's not at
Uh,
least, and that's on a
Actually, Rob, in America, that's 2 slices of pizza.
probably, yeah.
I'm serious. I mean, because
No,
they're
no, 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 yeah.
350 calories a slice
Yeah, and
so
and
yeah.
and that's where the issue is in your head, looking at that, like, okay, I need to eat how much I need to eat as a human. That's way more than 2 slices of pizza. So it doesn't fill you.
Right.
It doesn't. So that's then where the imbalances come in. But that's what for me. If you want to treat yourself, go treat yourself. Go absolutely smash it. But in the long term, it was how much I was eating and really making sure that those calories were at maintenance level
For
at
sure.
least, and that makes my sugars a lot easier to control.
So tell us, continuous glucose monitoring is a fairly new.
That one.
Yeah, there it is in the back of your arm. It's a
Yeah,
fairly new technology. I don't know. It's probably been around. You probably know more than I do. It's 5 years, maybe more to
I
the
would
to the
say
to the
so.
general public.
Yeah, so this is the Libra Link system. I'm trying to think of the official. Yeah, it's the Libra Freestyle Libra system. I have the
Yes.
Libra 2 on right now, and I believe, when would I have first had it? Sorry, I should have. I'm just trying to think. I believe, yeah, I think you're right around 5 years. 20. I usually work off tournaments and which worlds like it was, and if I had it at that point, but I believe it was, yeah, 2017, 2018 was when I first got it. But essentially, it comes in two parts. So you have I believe the sensor is in here, and then you have this picks up the needle. You put them together, and you have to clean it. I personally, I know this. I don't want to ruin your question before you've asked it, but they come off. They're meant to be on there for 2 weeks, but it's on this one. It's on a movable part of your arm. And the biggest thing I found, which I think is quite a funny story, when you first put it on, you may have found it yourself. I hit door frames all the time. So when I'm walking through a door frame, I didn't realize how close I walked, and I kid you not, every single time I would walk through a door frame in my house, obviously a house that I've lived in since I was born. Obviously, kind of, I guess you have your lines of paths or the racing line as such through the door, and I literally would hit every single door frame when it walked past the sensor because it doesn't stick out much, but that was quite funny. So they get abused, they get hit, they get. So I use this. I don't know if anyone out there is diabetic. This is a really good product. It's Kevlar no sting barrier film, and that my mum found, and it has been amazing, amazing. And the only time it really tends to come off now, I can work out, I can sweat. I spend a lot of time in Florida, and it can last 14 days easy with that. Um, but is if I take a crash, if I take a tumble, like if I hit the buoy and take a slide or something quite forceful, really like swipes it off, then it will come off, and there's nothing really you can do than that other than stick the big plasters over them that you can have. But yeah, with that, it was actually, I had rashes when I first got it. They gave me a little rash there, which I
Mhm.
think is very. I think like I looked online, and 2% of people, they'd done tests on it, and 2% of people had rashes to it. But I think it was more to do with the fact that something's on your skin for 14 days, getting no air, no breath.
Right.
I think that no matter what they do, some people are gonna be sensitive to that, especially if you have sensitive skin. And we originally got it to stop that, and we found that actually, if I spray it on, wait till it gets kind of half dry, a little tacky, and then the glue bonds to that, and then it sets, and it's just an extra kind of bonding mechanism, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's easy. It's easy to put on. It lasts 14 days, and I have an app on my phone. It actually works in the same way that Apple Pay works. So it's an NFC, I think it is NFC system. So the way that you would tap the card payment, you actually just tap there with I'm on my phone right now, so I can't show you. You tap there with the top of your phone. It pings, and it tells you where you've been. I believe for the last 8 hours if you haven't done a test in the most recent 8 hours, but as a diabetic you usually do unless it's overnight. So it stores 8 hours of knowledge in this, and then on the phone it keeps 24, and obviously it um, gives you a load of kind of statistics and values of your average. It can work out your HbA1c. So it's a really incredibly useful tool for a diabetic just to see And I think, again, I know you said a lot of actually healthy non-diabetics are using it now to kind of see where you track. But like I say, as a diabetic, I don't think people quite understand that if I have one Twizzler, one single
Yep.
lone Twizzler, which is 7 grams of carbs, more than that, 8 probably grams of carbs, nothing. Most people would just, oh, I'll have a Twizzler, thank you, have that, forget about it. If I have that and do nothing to it, I'll go up. I'll go out of my
Yeah.
range of healthy living, I guess you could say, and it would sit there for 3-4 hours before it comes back into the healthy range. So it's literally every single thing that goes in your mouth makes a massive, massive, massive difference to blood sugars, and it's obvious as a diabetic. And that's the biggest thing that this kind of shows you, is that little bits of carbs make a big difference to a diabetic, and being able to see that and how they react. One thing I learned is oatmeal is kind of we call it like porridge, like overnight oats, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
is notoriously known to be incredibly tough for diabetics, because it has a really quick acting, but a really long. It's just a weird the way that the oats react, especially if you get the instant oats. And I love overnight oats. They sit well. I feel great when I have them. And I actually found that if I mix the half overnight oats with the half traditional oats, so the half quick oats, you know, the stuff that is soft and kind of pre-rolled and I don't know what the hell they do to it, but it's softer with the traditional oats. That's kind of a more crunchy, chewy, not the best in
Hmm.
overnight oats if you have it straight up, because it just tastes like you're chewing on sawdust. But if I actually mix the two, it's so much easier. If I just do instant oats, I have to inject 40 minutes before, which is an insane amount of time, especially when you wake up in the morning, to actually think that the insulin takes 40 minutes to get in there, be ready. And literally, as soon as the oats go in, it's just like a boom, a straight up pump. And actually, just the little things like taking half the traditional oats and mixing them in kind of slows down that momentum. And that little tricks like that have made kind of it so much easier. And if I was having a finger prick and I prick my finger before, I go, okay, sweet, I'm 60 or 70 in the US measurement. I'm going to inject, and I'm going to test 2 hours later, which realistically is quite a short testing window with the finger pricks, like 12 a day. And I know in England with the NHS, we don't have to pay for them, but as an American, to be able to having to be paying for this and doing kind of 12, 20 tests a day must be kind of a tough thing to do. So say you're doing it every 2 hours, which again is quite consistent. I would have done this up, down, and I'd be level. But
Right.
you've completely missed this move, and you're only seeing these two moves. So that's where I found it really interesting that there's no gaps. And in one way, it's actually tough, because as a diabetic, and I know a lot of people really struggle with the mental side of it, the fact that it is always there. It is always there. It is one Twizzler is going to mess up your diabetes, in terms of if you do nothing about it, it's going to make it go up. And I hate to say it like that, but it does. If you have two Twizzlers, one Twizzler, and you do nothing to inject about it, I know it seems simple, but the amount of times as a non-diabetic that someone will offer you a piece of food and go, yeah, have that and have that,
Right.
and you don't even think about it. But the fact that as a diabetic, every time someone offers you, have that, oh, I got to inject now, like, oh, and that was really interesting to see that, because again, if you have that one Twizzler that someone gave you, and it spikes you up, and it kind of pushes you, your body, my exercise, the heat, all that stuff still pushes you kind of back down over time. It kind of has pushed me back down. I'm not that high anymore. But you've missed the 30 minutes after what someone gave you, and you don't realize quite how high that little things can spike you before they come back down. Especially if
Yeah. You got to
especially if
be
you live an
super
active lifestyle.
careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's less so careful, but more just being on it. And that's where a lot of people struggle with the mental side of it. I think it's a side that a lot of people don't talk about enough, is that it's I don't want to sound a millennial here, but it's incredibly stressful. Like, you have to, if you want to make your levels absolutely perfect, which I think is almost impossible. If you want to have, so if I set my range to again, I'm sorry, I don't know the American translation, but I assume it would be kind of the bottom of the range. So 4 is ideal in my millimoles. So I want to be from 4 to 10. And 10 is a little bit higher than ideal, but to be in that range, if you want to stay 100% in that range, you have to just every single moment of that day be on it, be looking, be checking. You have to know exactly what you're going to eat in 30 minutes for your lunch. You have to be injecting
Right.
previously before it, so you catch that spike absolutely spot on. So every single moment of your day, you have to be thinking about what you're going to do an hour ahead, an hour ahead, an hour ahead, and keeping on top of that. making sure you're thinking of what you did 2 days ago. How much exercise did you do? Just little things like I flew back home to England. I spent 6 days there. We'll say tasted the kind of reminded myself with the English cuisine, so maybe was eating a little more than I should have done, and like we talked about earlier, overeating makes it tougher. And then I went to Sacramento and was staying with a family there, and they were kind of showing me around, and I was trying to kind of keep control of what I was eating, but it was I was kind of tasting things there, and I come back to Chico, and that every single 3 steps I was okay, my blood sugars were good, but then I come back to Chico and kind of I'm almost calling this my training camp and started eating some normal foods, and what I had to inject probably dropped by probably at least half, if not half again. And that kind of out of almost what felt like nowhere. Like I didn't think I was eating that badly, especially in Sacramento, training, skiing, gymming, working out, full on days training. And then I come here and do the same thing. I'm just eating a little more sensible foods without, if you don't really notice it, maybe it got a little colder. Boom, the blood sugars completely go. I'm low all the time. I'm low like 3 times a day, hypoglycemic 3 times a day. And it's like, whoa, like I didn't expect that big of a difference. So you've got to think about what you did 2 days ago and the next day. And it's just a constant mental strain, which is something a lot of diabetics don't talk about. But I think because they don't, a diabetic can sometimes feel alone in the fact that I'm finding this a little bit tricky. Like why is that no one else is? So why should I be doing that? So it's nice to see with the social media, people talking about that and saying, man, this is tough. Because it's easy to go, this is tough. If I don't prick my arm and test my arm and I eat a Twizzler, I don't feel bad. I can go up to 20 millimoles, which is like 200, and I can come back down and let it kind of happen and eat the food and almost in my head kind of put it off and forget about it because I'm having a hard time dealing with all this, and I can feel fine. But that's the toughest thing about diabetes. I can feel okay, but I know in 10 years time, my foot's going to fall off. And then that's
Right.
not even a joke. That's serious. Like,
Yeah.
so
Or you're going to lose your eyesight. You're going to lose your
yeah,
kidneys. That's why it's
but
so important to monitor your
yeah.
glucose.
Oh, 100%. But it's so easy and that's, everyone knows that and everyone says that. And I know that. It's like people who are smoking know that it's an awful
Right.
for them. But sometimes it's like I'm just having a hard time kind of like dealing with these sugars right now. They are not doing what I want to do. They are not going where I want to go. I'm working on it. I'm injecting. I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat. I'm putting this stuff right. And sometimes your sugars will just be and doing exactly what you're like. Why are you doing this? And that is honestly that's how it works. And I started trying to follow a lot more diabetics on social media and people that were kind of quite big in this space, and that really helped me kind of deal with all that side of it. I don't want to get too deep into that, but just seeing that other people were like some of the people that had the best levels were like some days you wake up and I have the same meal, I would have the same oats at the same time with the same amount of carbs, the same amount of fats, and it would do the completely different thing to what it did yesterday. And sometimes, but it's good to know that other people struggle with that, and that's what.
Yeah.
And that's where the CGM can be great because it knows exactly where you're going, but it's also a lot. It shows you exactly the mistakes that you're making, and sometimes it's like a you're rubbish. What are your bloods doing? What are your bloods doing? And that can be a side of it a lot of people don't talk about, but that's the one side that can make it a little bit trickier, if that makes sense.
For sure. And there
Yeah,
and then that just adds a little bit more stress in your
yeah,
life
yeah,
when you have all those
yeah.
sugars going up and down, and then that
And you
just
see everything.
compounds the blood glucose. I
Yeah,
mean, it
pretty
makes your
much.
glucose go up when you get stressed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, pretty much. But it has been probably like I don't want to make it sound like, but it's been one of the most valuable things that I've ever had as a diabetic to be able to see that and use it, and when it's going well, you can see exactly where you're going, exactly what the food does to you, and that's one of the greatest things about it. You can learn so much from it if you're willing to kind of put that time into it.
well, and obviously, Rob, you have definitely been willing to put the time in, and
Well, yeah,
you're an
I try it.
you know you're an inspiration, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on our podcast is just to get the word out that you guys are in the same boat, and
Yeah,
type 1 diabetes can be conquered. You just
yeah,
have to work,
oh,
and
100%.
and all you guys do have a lot of the same struggles, as far as stressing about the blood sugars and long-term complications and all that.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
appreciate you being on today, and I am
Thank you.
sharing
No,
your Instagram right now, and I hope that,
thank you.
yeah, I hope that anybody that is watching can share, can follow you, and not just because you're diabetic, but you're a really, really awesome skier.
Thank you. Thank
And I
you. Thank
really
you.
like watching your short videos, that's for sure.
Thank you.
It's amazing to watch it. I think they're like, when you go through a pass, you probably know exactly, but it's like 7 seconds, isn't it?
Oh,
Probably?
it's 16 seconds. A full six boys is at my speed is 16.08 seconds.
Okay. And
So it's quick.
yeah, and you're like you say, it's an anaerobic sport. I picked up barefoot water skiing. I grew up slalom water skiing, but I picked up barefoot water skiing a few years ago, and I'm an endurance mountain bike racer.
Yeah.
And the coach that I used down in Florida, Lane Bowers, you might have heard of him.
No, I have
Um,
not.
yeah, he was in the
I
X
think I may
Games
have
and a
heard the name.
world,
Oh yeah. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
world class barefooter
Yeah.
and coach now. And
Hmm.
he said, look, water skiing, specifically barefoot water skiing, it's not an endurance sport, it's a sprint.
Yeah. It's a
And
sprint. It's a
right,
sprint
for
big time.
sure. So I'm sure after that 16 seconds, you are breathing really, really
Oh
hard.
God, yeah, yeah, and that's and like I say, this actually the best example is and I think this system was one of the best. It was a really cool thing that they put, and you could see the load that came on the rope. Someone, I think the record that's been pulled on it, I think was 1,000 pounds. So that's 1,000 pounds again. Literally, you finish the turn with nothing. There
Right.
was no pull on the rope. And in the obviously there's six boys, 16 seconds, divide by six. You've got like what 2.5 seconds between boys. In that time to the first wake, you're picking up 1,000 pounds. Some people do. I pick up about 700, 800 pounds.
Wow.
I think if my maths are somewhat good, I'm not too good with the pounds. Um, but in that second of time, you're going from 0 to 700 to 1,000 pounds back to 0 again, and then you're doing that 6 times in that pass. So there's some, and obviously that's the high level. I don't want to disencourage anyone from the sport because you think that's obviously at the highest
Right.
level in the sport as such. There's way less than that at the start. Don't worry, you don't have to be able to pick up 1,000. But I can't deadlift 400 pounds. I have to be light. I have to be mobile. So that's where the kind of the crazy technique comes in, and been really kind of dialed in on that. But it's a lot. It's a lot for your body. It's a lot for you to be able to deal with. So it's hard work. It's hard work, safe
Yeah,
to say.
yeah, for sure.
It's a good
It's fun
workout.
watching you. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you for being on today, Rob.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm gonna keep following you on social media and keep watching you ski,
Thank
and I
you.
wish you the best for this season.
Thank
Sounds
you.
like you're getting prepared right now as we talk. So,
Yeah.
I'm super excited for you.
First tournament is May 1st. So there's
That's
a
2 weeks,
yes,
right?
2 weeks. There's it'll all be webcast. It's all on YouTube. So if you follow me on social medias, we'll keep up to date. And the sport is really kind of starting to see a resurgence. Like I say, there's a tournament every single weekend until I think there's 2 weekends off till September, and then it's back on again. So it's like there's so many tournaments this year. I'm going to try keep as much of it up to date on my YouTube and my socials and all that stuff. So if you're
Awesome.
interested in kind of following along, I try kind of show a very honest approach to it all. So if you're interested, follow along and we can do the journey together, as they say.
Awesome. I'm going to be following you, and I thank you for being on today. You've definitely realized our goal of educating and empowering individuals to take charge of
I
their own
hope
health.
so.
So I so appreciate it, Rob. So thank you for
Thank you.
being on, and thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. Tune in tomorrow. Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham.